Welcome to the Enigmatic Colle System. I'm Latvian Grandmaster Arturs Neiksans, and it is my pleasure to present you another opening course by ChessEnigma. So what is the Colle System? It is one of the simplest setups that one can choose by playing d4, and it is eventually reaching this position with d4, e3, knight f3, knight e2, and bishop d3. It is highly applicable pretty much against everything that black can choose, and that's why it's not even an opening, it's an entire system. So this course will be divided in 11 chapters, and the very first chapter is going to be about one of the most classical systems if black plays bishop e7. Let's get on to it. So here we play d4, d5, knight f3, here e3. The order of the moves is, there could be a number of order of the moves to reach this, right? With e3, bishop d3, I guess it makes most sense to start with this. And now after e6, bishop d3, black normally responds with c5 and wants to challenge your center with knight c6. But also, of course, there is something like bishop e7. Immediately, we just continue our plan, short castle. And perhaps it's important to mention that if your opponent hasn't yet played c5, there's no real need for you to play c3 to strengthen the center, so you can postpone this decision. So short castle, you put the knight on d2, you're thinking about e4 ideas, let's say b6. B6 normally comes with the idea to play bishop a6, try to trade your very good bishop on d3, which is sort of looking at the black king. So that's why a very common response is queen e2. You are at least slowing down black's intentions to play bishop a6. So let's say bishop b7 could be played, and now there's no reason for you to play c3. All you do is play e4 immediately. Now here's the trick. If black doesn't react to whatever you're doing in the center, let's say he plays something else like knight e7 or knight c6 or even c5, normally what you want to do, you want to close the center with e5. By doing this, you push away the knight from f6, followed by rook e1, knight f1, and think about some future ideas like knight g3. You have excellent chances to conduct a typical king's side attack. So black simply has to take it, and after knight takes on d4, knight e7 seems to be necessary, and just play rook d1, right? Position the rook on the x-ray with the black queen, and again you're thinking about active moves like c4, bishop f4, again simply enjoying a very good position out for the opening. So let's go back. Of course, bishop e7 is just one move, but it makes more sense for black to play c5, and this is when we are going to play c3. c3 accomplishes a couple of things. First, after black's any c takes on d4, you always want to recapture with e-pawn. Why? Because this is going to open your Dachshund bishop on either f4 or g5 squares. If black plays c4, now you will have retreat square on c2, allowing you to think about playing e4 later. So that's why here c3 is important only after black has played c5. So knight c6 makes sense, knight b to d2, bishop e7. Again, I think these order of the moves are highly transpositional. You can toy with them. Castles, queen e2. This is the classical setup, the start of the Colle system. And here, I guess it's a good idea to check some of the possible continuations from black. Okay, probably the most popular response is going to be b6, but let's check what happens after, for example, c takes on d4. As already told, after c takes on d4, we always recapture the e-pawn. And our idea is to start a kingside attack, because essentially we have reached the so-called Carlsbad structure. And I do believe that normally the pawn chain, it sort of shows us the direction we should be playing at. And now you see there's this direction of the pawns, b2, c3, d4, they're like hinting towards a kingside attack, and this is what we are going to do. The same applies also for black. You see he has pawns on f7, e6, and d5, and this means probably black should be playing at a queen side. Eventually something like rook b8, b5, a5, b4, and establish some sort of a target on c3. Well, this is the Colle structure at its finest. So if you have some prior experience, it's fine. But even if you don't, again, just know you should be focusing on the kingside attack. So for example, black here plays a6, right? So he tries to carry out his idea to play b5. And now knight e5 is simple and good. Why is this? Knight e5 opens you the f3 square for the knight. Right after knight f3, you are thinking about bishop f4 or bishop g5, consolidating all of your army around the black king. Sometimes, alternatively, of course, you can think about even ideas like f4, rook f3, and go directly for the attack. If black ever takes on e5, the general idea is that you should be happy to take with a pawn. Why is this? Because this drives away the knight from f6, which you can then think about starting a kingside attack with knight f3, queen h5, bishop f4, maybe g3, h4, knight g5, and again, look at the pawn on h7 and the potential kingside attack. So here, let's say black doesn't do that. He plays queen c7. We play knight f3 according to the plan. Black plays according to the plan because, once again, he wants to play b4, he wants to take on c3 and establish this as a potential weakness. We play bishop g5. Again, we're thinking about ideas like rook e1, rook d1, and do something active at the king side. Let's say black plays bishop b7. Take it, put the other knight on e5, bishop b7, and again, just play rook e1. Yeah, maybe here I have to mention that, of course, f4 here is very tempting idea, so that you want to make this rook lift on the third rank. However, it seriously weakens the e4 square. So use it at your discretion. For example, here, f4 simply jumps under knight e4. So that is a bit a dangerous idea for you. So simple rook e1 is fine. Maybe you can think about rook e3, rook h3, and start a potential kingside attack. So this is, once again, just one idea, really. Let's go back. Again, black has definitely some other choices. For example, black could think about playing c4, which is not very good because it removes any tension from the center. And after bishop c2, let's say here black tries to play b5. Now, b5 idea is normal, right? Because once again, black is thinking about playing b4, establish weakness here, maybe even a5, b4, a4, and try to create some targets at the queen side. But it also completely neglects what's happening in the center. Of course, now you're going to play e4. So again, what to do for black? Because if black doesn't take, you want to play e5. You want to push away the knight from f6, and then again think about starting a kingside attack. Should it be rook e1, knight f1, knight g3? Should it be maybe remove the knight? Let's say king h1, knight g1, f4, g4, f5. There's so many ways to improvise, so you first close the center and then start a kingside attack. So I would expect that black still wants to take on e4. And after knight takes on e4, here, for example, we are already thinking about some tricks like knight f6, queen e4, attack the knight, threaten with a checkmate on h7. So for example, let's say h6 leads to some mass problems, right? You see, because of this trick, the knight on c6 is lost. So black probably would have to respond with something like bishop b7. Now again, knight g5, you're looking towards this pawn on h7, you're thinking about knight f6, thinking about knight h7, maybe queen h5 at some point later. And you have very strong bishops here which are looking directly at the black king. So let's say h6 is responded by the opponent, and now simply take it here, queen e4. We renew the threat to deliver a checkmate on h7, and after g6, here you already have a killing attack. Knight e6. Black has no choice, he has to take it. Give a check. Black cannot go to h8, that's going to be mate on h7. Bishop g7, check, check. Bishop h5. You see, this line is completely forced. There's no way for black even to divert. Queen g6 is a big threat. Now just take on h6, the black king is exposed, and this leads to victory to white. Again, really beautiful line, which once again showcases that black can very easily misplay this. White's attack is very straightforward. Well, black could also play h6 here, but it doesn't really change anything from our perspective. We're still going to play e4, play knight e4, and again the same threat, knight f6, queen e4, threat with the mate on h7, and after g6 you simply collect the pawn with excellent kingside attacking chances. So we are going to go back, and like I already said, this c4 is not very good, and definitely black has some other choices. For example, black can also play queen c7. And queen c7, this idea in general comes with some intentions to play e5, because you're not the only one who is thinking about playing e4 and bringing your dark-square bishop in the game. It's also black, because if he plays e5, he can develop his light-square bishop on a more active square. Now after queen c7, it's a good idea to release tension from the center. After d takes on c5, black most likely has to take. We play e4. And now once again, black is at the crossroads. He needs to understand what he wants to do. If he is about to take on e4, it allows us to activate the bishop on c1. But if black doesn't do that, and let's say he plays rook e8, we can play e5. Again, this is a very common idea, which comes from various closed French positions, the King's Indian attack, because the structure is the same. You push away the knight on f6 to start a kingside attack. For example, knight e7, attack the bishop, it goes away, and bishop f4. Now you see there's a lot of arrows, h4, knight g5, sometimes the Greek sacrifice, so bishop takes h7 might work, rook e1, rook d1, and black is a bit struggling to understand where exactly lies his counterplay. That being said, of course, it's a good idea for you to keep a close eye on f6, right? Because f6 or f5 might be a very nice way how black would try to kill your initiative at the king's side. Here, I believe you can simply take on f6, the bishop on e7 is under attack, and you're opening the position with simply better developed pieces. But let's say if black plays something like bishop f8, watch out for f6, watch out for the Greek sacrifice, bishop h7, knight g5, and queen h5, with possibly already a forced victory. Let's go back. So I imagine that after e4, black most likely has to take it. We take with the knight. Now the bishop on c5 is under attack. Black, I guess, has to take it. We take with the queen. And again, I mean, black has some issues, right? How to protect the pawn on h7. g6 allows you to play bishop h6, queen h4, knight g5, or maybe bishop g5, bishop f6, rearrange the bishop, and then queen h4, knight g5. It's a very easy kingside initiative. So most likely black has to respond with f5. But by doing this, he seriously weakens the e5 square. So for example, let's say king h8, we play rook e1, we occupy the e5 square, and yeah, we're thinking about how to get either knight there, maybe think about removing this knight on c6, then launching the knight on e5. In ideal scenario, you would love to get the bishop on f4. So rook e8 here, improving the e5 threat is simply a blunder, because you simply take the pawn on f5, and the rook on e8 is, you see, it's under attack. So black cannot do this. So this leads us to the question, why black cannot really play e5 immediately? Because it looks very natural, right? Because black has this small center, he threatens to play e4, he wants to play bishop e6 and continue development. The problem is his king's safety. So there is an immediate refutation. You give a check, and you play knight g5. And now this position doesn't really look so dangerous, but it is, because there's multiple threats. So the obvious threat is knight f7 at some point deliver a check to the king, right? But of course, you don't want to give up 2 minor pieces for the rook. But the other threat is either queen h5 and threat on h7 with the checkmate, or even knight h7. After knight h7, king h7, queen h5 also would be a checkmate on the board. And this leads us to the line where black plays h6, you play queen h5, and now you are threatening with knight f7 check, so it would seem. And when black plays queen e7 to draw more resources closer, suddenly white has a killing attack. Queen g6, threaten with a mate, and after h takes, it's a mate on the board. So this is a very cute trick to know. It's gonna definitely help you to score a lot of easy points, and it's fun. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back all the way. This was this moment when we're discussing c4, we're discussing c takes on d4, we're discussing queen c7. But okay, I mean, let's talk about b6, because b6 seems to be a normal move, right? Because black is keeping his pawn structure healthy, he's not yet defining the setup in the center, he wants to play bishop b7, and then figure out what to do with the center. Now it's a good time to play e4, because you're not gonna get a better moment. And again, the same rule applies. If black doesn't take on e4 immediately, you want to play e5. Push away the knight and think about the king side attack. For example, let me show you a line. Let's say black plays c takes on d4, and there's a very nice intermezzo move, e5. Black cannot take on c3 because we're simply going to be faster. I mean, you can calculate it for a moment. You're going to see that black is in the end losing a piece for no good reason. So this e5 intermezzo move is very, very important. And after knight e7, only now we take on d4. So in case you're wondering why this is important, why don't we play c takes on d4 immediately? Well, because then black would take on e4, leaving you with an isolated pawn on d4, which you would actually have to know precisely how to play out. So that's why this e5 is very important move order. So knight e7, c takes on d4, and okay, let's say here black could play knight b4. Knight b4 is a very, very common move, because if black doesn't do this and he plays something like bishop b7, you play a3, you secure yourself against the knight b4 threat. You're thinking about, once again, the same idea, rook e1, knight f1, knight g3. Think about the king side attack, maybe h4 at some point, and knight g5 ideas later. So knight b4 feels to be critical, because black wants to drive away your bishop and then play bishop a6, winning your exchange on f1. And if you allow the bishop to be traded, well, I find it very hard to believe that you're going to have any real success with a king side attack. So you need to preserve it. How to do it? That is the bishop b5 move. Very important, right? Also make sure there's no forks on c2, so that just in case your rook doesn't stand on e1, you would be blundering a fork on c2. Keep an eye on this. Here it's just a ridiculous move because we'll play rook b1. And now let's say black tries to bother your bishop. We retreat. Well, let's say black plays bishop b7. Now we push away the intruder here and again position the bishop on this very important b1, h7 diagonal. Let's say rook c8, knight b3, thank you for the created weakness on c5, knight b6, queen d3, very nice move, trying to provoke some weaknesses. Only move here is g6, because f5, obviously you take en passant on f6, and the h7 threat is huge. So g6 now lands the bishop, you play queen e3, you're thinking about again some simple ideas like queen f4, knight g5, h4, h5, threat with the checkmate, and it's very difficult for black to respond with this. Because if he plays f5 or f6, try to slow down your attack, you just take it. You just take on f6, and it's going to create even more weaknesses around the black king. All right, let's go back. Let's go back for a moment, and here. Yeah, here, okay, maybe I should show it very quickly. The d-dex on c3 has already said it's a mistake. Yeah, you take it, and you take with a check. Yeah, pretty important, leaving you with an extra material. So like I said, this capture on c3, it quite doesn't work. And in the end, most likely black has to take on e4. Now you take with the knight. And here's the trick. Black doesn't have time to play c6 on d4, creating you a weakness on d4. If he does this, this is a very common blunder. Take it, queen e4. You already know this trick. So you're threatened with a checkmate on h7, and the knight on c6 is undefended. So black cannot do this. So instead, he would have to continue development with bishop b7, and now we're gonna take on c5. Again, black has some choices how to respond. Well, bishop takes on c5 feels quite natural. But let's say black plays b takes on c5. We play rook e1, we develop our pieces, we think about bishop f4, rook d1, just actively position the pieces in the center. Let's say black is sort of concerned about the bishop g5 potential threat. He plays h6. We take it and play queen e4. Again, the same idea. Threat with the mate on h7 and g6. Just drops a pawn on h6 and the attack is still going very strong. So most likely black has to play queen c7. And now we play the same idea, knight g5. So our idea is to play knight f6 and something on h7 is hanging. And h6 allows us to execute a rather funny fork. You take on f6 and knight h7. You see the rook on f8 is under attack. The knight on h7 is odd, but it's getting the job done. So let's say rook d8, you take on f6, bishop h6, and again, you have not only an extra pawn, but a very deadly kingside attack. So, yeah, maybe indeed black has to take with the bishop, but it doesn't solve the problems. Because look at this. Again, you take on f6. And if he here takes with the g-pawn, it just leaves the king completely exposed. Yeah, rook d1 and the king's exposed. We're thinking about queen e4, queen g4, or queen h4 ideas. There's bishop h7 discovered, check already threat. So I don't like black's position, not for a second. So if he finally takes here with a queen, this is a major blunder, right? Because after bishop g5, you see the black queen is trapped, right? So he has nowhere to go. The knight is protecting the bishop on g5. There's no queen f5, there's no queen g6, there's no queen a5, there's no queen d4. So this is a very, very common trick. And I'm pretty sure it's gonna allow you to score a lot of easy points. Let's revisit once again what we learned from this very first chapter. The first chapter is all about the classical system with bishop e7. So this is the start of the Colle system. Again, it's not only an opening, it's an entire system because you can play it against pretty much any setup black chooses. Of course, you're imprisoning your own bishop on c1, but your idea is to play queen e2 and e4 pretty soon. So this bishop will be joining the game. Again, the general rule is if black plays for the c-pawn on d4, you recapture with the e-pawn. And you're always looking for a simple kingside attack. If black never plays c5, you don't play c3. So you play knight e2, you play e4, or maybe queen e2, e4, and try to make the break in the center. If black tries to trade early the bishops here with, where was this? I think it was bishop e7, here, and after b6, he's threatened with the bishop a6. Then you can include queen e2 to slow down his intentions to play bishop a6, and you are preparing to play e4 later. And finally, the critical moment is pretty much in any position. If black reaches this position and you play e4, if black doesn't take on e4 immediately, you pretty much always want to play the next move, e5, pushing away the kingside knight in order to start active kingside operations with rook e1, knight f1, knight g3, and causing havoc at the kingside. Of course, Always watch out for c takes knight b4, because I do believe that this let's go bishop on d3 is a very important piece.
Access ChessEnigma's free sample lessons. Enjoy videos, interactive exercises, and a digital board to practice anywhere on any device. Sign up for free and start improving your chess from home today.